You've watched many editing tutorials, but somehow when it comes to editing your own photograph, you struggle to apply the techniques that you learned in the tutorial to your own photograph. And that's why I made this video, so that we can edit the exact same RAW file together. I'll be using Lightroom Classic for this one, and it'll be a deep dive into the editing of one image, global adjustments, local adjustments, all while you follow along step by step on your own Lightroom Classic. I'm Danielle. I'm a professional photo guide in Africa, and I lead photo safaris throughout my home continent for photographers of all skill levels. So let's go. Alrighty, so here we have an elephant in Mana Pools in Zimbabwe, and looking at the image as a whole, you can see I'm working on a Mac, but if you're on a Windows, the same edits apply. It might just be a slightly different shortcut for you. So first thing I can see when I look at the image is it's not straight. That's really important. And then it needs to pop a little bit more. It's quite bland and quite flat, which I would expect because I'm using RAW. I sometimes crop straight away, and other times I will leave it till later, but let's try. You can either straighten by looking at it, just judging it that way, or by using the spirit level tool over here. And then you can find a straight line in the image, draw it along the straight line, and Lightroom straightens it for you. So that's that straighten tool or spirit level there. Yeah, so that already looks much better. Composition wise, it's an animalscape or an animal in a landscape. So I would love to make it a little bit wider in terms of aspect ratio. I would probably opt for a 16:9. I do play around and see how I like it. In this case, now it's a question of, do I keep the tree, do I not keep the tree? Let me see. I have a look usually and then I see. I don't mind the tree there in the corner. To me, it forms a pretty good border on the edge there, but that's completely up to you. The other thing that I pay attention to is the strong line. So there's a strong line in the background where the trees separate from the ground. And then there's a fairly strong line, the tree line, where it meets the sky over here in the mountain, where it meets the sky. So compositionally, this is textbook thirds, so you don't have to stick to that, but that is something to keep an eye on when you are editing. Right. Top is temperature. Now you'll see that my panels here are different. I have made them into the order that I've set them to the order that I like. You can set them to an order that you prefer. You can right click and then customize your develop panel there. So I have them from the ones that I use most to the ones I use least. White balance, overall, I'm looking at the whites in the frame, and it looks a little bit on the warm side for me. I know it was an overcast day, so I'm going to drop the temperature by very, very slight few numbers there. Alright, maybe a little bit up. This is something I check afterwards again, after you've applied different settings like contrast, whites, blacks, all of that. What I often do is I'm holding shift and double clicking on the slider there, and that just helps you to get the most out of your dynamic range, the most out of your highlight shadows, whites and blacks. It doesn't always work, especially when you're working with high key and low key images, but give it a go. Double click while holding shift on a Mac, and then you will see it shifting to the best possible point on there, and that gives you a good starting point. The whites and the blacks sometimes completely mess up the image, so be very selective. It's not a hard and fast rule. It is just something to try to get a good baseline from your image. Right, so white balance, really important to do first. I reckon that's why Lightroom put it at the top, and then even out your highlight shadows, whites and blacks. Vibrance I would add, but I rather do it selectively with greens and blues, etc. If I can afford a little bit of vibrance without anything in the frame looking odd or off or unnatural, then I would add a little bit of vibrance, but not too much. And that's about it for global adjustments on this image. I really wouldn't do much more to this. I'll show you in just a second why I do that and why it's more natural to go local in terms of editing rather than global. Right, so the next thing I would do is I would want to remove this as a distraction, and that is why I sometimes crop later rather than earlier, because sometimes Lightroom doesn't get it right and it leaves a little bit of a smudge, and then you can crop that out from your original crop. I'm going to use AI for this one. You could probably use your clone or heal tool, but AI is really good at most of it. So I'm selecting generative AI and detect objects, and I'm going to select the Impala droppings, I think, over there. Okay, it's a little bit wide over it. I'll subtract over here, and I'll just decrease the size of the brush, and I'll brush around there. Right. Now let's see if Lightroom does a good job. I'm removing. It's not always that great, but it does give you options. If it doesn't get it right, then it gets 3 options, and you can always redo that again and give Lightroom a second and a third and a fourth chance to remove. Alright, so there you'll see the variations. That's number 1, that's number 2, and that's number 3. What you can do is just zoom in and make sure when you go through your different versions. So I think 1 is actually pretty good and looks very natural. Remember, for competitions, often you can't remove things, so just make sure that you have the competition rules before you do that. Some allow minor distractions to be removed. My opinion is that that's a minor distraction. You're not taking out another elephant or another animal, so to me that's a minor distraction. Alright, looking at this now, it needs a little bit of punch. Now, whites give punch. Alright, I do watch my histogram while I'm doing whites, because obviously it affects all the whites in the frame, and you'll see as the triangle solidifies top right on the histogram that the whites are clipping, and hovering over it, it'll tell you which whites are clipping. I'll take the whites up to where they're not clipping. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll deal with the sky in just a second. So that's pretty good, and then I'll tweak the blacks as well. I do use the tone curve from time to time. If this gives me enough control, then I'm happy to do that. But if you go into very selective shadows, highlights, whites and black editing, then tone curve is very useful. I love green in an image, and I'm going to demonstrate to you, instead of doing vibrance on the whole image where things start looking too much. Often when you take the vibrance up to affect one color, then other colors in the frame start looking a little bit weird. So in this case, it's actually not too bad, but let me show you how to bring only the greens out in this, because I still like the dusty sort of look of this. I don't want the ground to be oversaturated or over vibrant. So what I'll do in this case is I will go to Color Mixer, choose the HSL under Mixer, Hue, Saturation, Luminance. Make sure saturation is selected, and then there's a little picker here on the left, and you pick that. Now you'll see there's a cross, a plus sign, and an up and down circle. So you put the cross, the plus sign, over the greens that you want to saturate, and you click, you hold down, and you drag up. And if you look at the panel on the right, you'll see that aqua and blue is picked up in this area where my little plus sign was. Then I'll take it to another green area, and I'll click and drag up in that area. And I'll choose different greens, and just click and drag up. And why this is more natural than doing overall vibrance or overall saturation is you are picking an area of color, and Lightroom tells you, okay, I see aqua and green and yellow and a little bit of blue in that, and I'm increasing all of those colors saturation proportionately. And that makes for much more natural color editing, in my opinion. It'll pick up the mixture that's under it, rather than you just sliding one green slider up, or one blue slider, one aqua slider up. Lightroom picks up the combination of colors in there. So that's one option of doing the greens. I'm going to reset that, and I'm going to show you another way of doing it, the greens in the image. You can also do a range mask, and specifically a color range mask, in which case it gives you a picker, and you can pick out the green that you want to saturate. So you can say, I want to saturate this green, and you can see by the overlay that Lightroom has selected all the greens in the image that fall into that category that I picked. But it has also obviously seen a little bit of the elephant, some tone that's represented in the elephant. So I'm going to undo that just to make my life easier. I'm going to try again on a different green. So there it's not selecting so many greens, and it's also not selecting the elephant, because I only want to really work on the greens in the trees. If you want to add that little green up there, you see the lighter green over there. If you want to add that, hold on to your picker, zoom in using your navigator here on the left. You can zoom in even more to make it very accurate. Hold down Shift on a Mac, and you'll see the plus sign that's next to the dropper. So it's saying, what should I add to the already selected color? So I'm holding down Shift. If I release Shift, the plus goes away. So I'm holding down Shift, and I'm picking that green, and that adds it to the mask. So now you've selected all the greens that you want in the image. You can still select those, but they're pretty close to gray, and I have a feeling that they're going to select the elephant in the foreground as well. So these are the majority of the greens that you want to saturate, and in that case you just go saturation up. So you've got the color mask option, and you've got the option to do it by HSL color mixer. So those are two options, and you can also do the same for blues, for example. So to show you, let's go back to the color mixer, HSL under the mixer, saturation, pick the blues of the mountain. I'm clicking and dragging up, and often I do this with sky as well. So I would click on the blue part of the sky with the plus part, and I would drag up. I'm just going to go extreme so you can see. So that's way up and that's way down. So you can also use it to desaturate. Look at the slider on the right hand side. So I'm clicking and dragging up, and I'm clicking and dragging down. Alright, so you take it to where you feel it looks natural. I'm all for natural editing. You might have a completely different style, but the tutorials that I give will definitely get you to edit naturally and to enhance what's already there, unless you are editing for creative fine art photography. That is a little bit more dramatic, but for normal editing, I quite like to do it naturally. So that's colors, and that's how to saturate specific colors in the frame. Obviously, if your subject contains those colors, like blues or greens, just know that it's also going to saturate that. So it saturates everything in the scene. You can be selective on your masking, like I showed you, to just select specific ones, and then you can still brush out certain areas. But that's the basics of selecting a specific color. Now let's talk about the sky. A sky with branches in front of it is really tricky, and it risks looking fake or with a little halo around it. And as you'll see, when you try to do this, let's do select sky. I don't find select sky to be extremely accurate all of the time. In this case, it didn't do too badly. Okay, but there are still patches of sky in between. Okay, so I want to bring back some detail in the sky. Now I want to add those patches. The red is just an overlay, so I'm pressing O, and I can see what the camera has selected as sky. I want to add these little patches to the sky in between the branches. Having said that, I never ever edit so dramatically that those things get left behind completely, so I wouldn't do this sort of editing because that just looks terrible. Alright, so I do want to add, for purpose of natural editing, those little ones. So you'll see the sky over here. Okay, I'm just gonna rename it sky so you can follow along. I'm gonna add to the sky. Right. So let's see. Okay, I'm just gonna do this as greenery, so that's easy to differentiate. So I want to add to the sky. Okay, and I'm going to do that by using a brush. Remember, if this is too fast or too slow for you, YouTube has a speed option where you can go 1.5 or 2 times faster, or you can make me talk really slow by going slower. So remember that you can do that. So I'm adding to the sky with a brush. Now I want to select these little pieces in between. So I'm going to have to zoom in quite a bit, right? And I want to add this to the brush, to the mask. So I'm going to increase the brush to cover that whole area. And the really important part here is that auto mask has to be on. Okay. If auto mask is off, I'll demonstrate for you. It covers the whole area. Okay. If auto mask is on, so I'm in the brush, I've ticked auto mask. Now Lightroom will only select all the tones that fall under that little plus in the center. Do you see the little plus in the center of my circle, of my brush? You say to Lightroom, pick only those tones and those colors in that whole circle. And I clicked on the light bit of sky, and it selected only the sky. And so you can go through your whole frame, and you can make sure that that little plus falls just on the sky, and you can fill in all the gaps in between so that you don't get a different sky in different parts of the image. You'll see as soon as the plus sign goes onto something green, your whole circle will fill, because then you've told Lightroom to select greens. So you want to make sure that that little plus icon falls on the sky. If you are lazy and you want to save time, then you can make a really big brush like this. You just have to be very selective on, so say there, you'll see my plus sign is on the sky. I'm going to click it, and it filled everything in that circle with the sky that I selected. So there, I'm aiming to fill that little gap of sky over there. So I'm holding the plus sign over the sky, and you can see that my circle, my brush, is covering the whole area. I'm going to click on the sky, and you'll see it's filling in the little bit. So you can do it, to save time, you can do it as a whole, and you can just select the sky and make sure that the circle covers all the little sky bits, or a lot of sky bits, rather than do it little bit. There I can still see a little bit. Let's try. Okay, I've clicked on the sky and it's filled in all the gaps. Alright, so I always say Lightroom is coloring for adults. It's very therapeutic. I love it. Right, so you've got the sky selected over there. And what I like to do on a sky is to dehaze it slightly to bring back some detail. Okay, not that level. Okay, just a little bit of detail recovered, some blues, etc. You can also decrease exposure, but that looks a little bit false sometimes. I find dehaze works pretty well. And then what I also do, especially during the winter months in Africa, which are very dry, you get very grayed out skies on photographs. They're not necessarily as grayed out when you see them, to the eye, but in photographs they just blow out and look very grey. So I would recover with temperature. So I gave you one option to do it with blues in your color mixer or with your color mask, your color range mask, but you can also just select the sky and, just to show you, select a cooler temperature for the sky. Now what you might notice, and this is where a little bit of advanced editing comes in. You might notice, do you see when I go very dramatic on my white balance over there? Do you see how the sky mask has also selected some of the foliage? Okay, and that's not good, because if you turn that blue, then obviously your trees will start going blue on the edges, and that's not very natural. So I'm going to leave it like that. But on the sky mask now, I'm going to say, do you know what? I want to subtract some things from the sky mask. And I'm going to subtract using a brush. Okay, so bear with me. So it's the sky mask, but it's picked up a few trees on the edges, and I want to take those out of the sky mask as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to use a brush, right? I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. All right. Now I'm going to go, that's the overlay for the sky mask, and there you can see it's picked up the greenery. So what I want to do is I want to subtract the green from that sky mask. I hope you're following. I'm going to click on the green, and you'll see how it took away. It tells me that was the mask that I selected, but it is subtracted from the sky mask. And you can see how it's taken away. Is it this one? It's this one. So that's before, and that's after I subtracted the greenery from the sky. Before, there's the greenery is together with the sky, and there's without. And what I've basically done is said, from the sky mask, take away the greens. And that I usually do all along the edges, just to make sure that the greenery, which I'm selecting, is not forming part of the blue sky, and it's not going to go green. That's what I have found the most natural way to get rid of those blue edges. It is time consuming, but it makes a big difference. It's not aberration or anything, it's just you affecting the sky, but the sky mask is overlapping with the greenery. So that will give you a much more natural look to your edits. And now let's just do that again. I'm going to go down. So it's selecting very little of the foliage on the ends, and you can go and continue doing that until you're happy with these greenery. You can zoom in and you can select a little bit until those blues are not part of those greens are not part of the blue mask. So that's the most natural way of doing that. Now I want to talk about subject selection. So I like to add a little bit of texture to elephants because they are textured, and I think to enhance what's already there is the goal. Now what you'll notice is Lightroom isn't always so good at selecting subject. I'm telling Lightroom now to select subject. Okay, not too bad. Yeah, that's all right. So notice here how, notice here how it didn't do a good job at isolating the elephant's tail there, but the rest of it, I think it did a pretty good job. I want to compare that AI subject selection. I'm going to delete this one, okay? And I want to compare that to an object selection. Now this has become my go-to when I'm selecting subjects, because I find that I don't have to double check Lightroom first, and I don't have to undo Lightroom's incorrect selection. I can just go and select the object myself. It's my subject, but it's object selection. So there's an option for a square, object selection, a rectangle, and then there's an option for a brush. So I just take the brush and I brush in. I tell Lightroom, rather look in this area for an object. And let's see how that does compared to, okay, that's a little bit better. So you'll see there at the tail, it didn't do a great job of it, but it did a little bit of a better job on the edges, I would say, than the automatic or the AI subject selection. So for those little things, I find that people are so hesitant to do the old-fashioned take it out with a brush, as we all used to do, because we become lazy and dependent on AI, which is not good. So I'm going to subtract from this mask. I'm going to subtract with the brush, and the brush is going to be really small, and I'm just going to go in and clear that out. Again, I'm not always too worried about this because I don't edit in such a drastic way that I have to be concerned about these small little bits. So I don't do extremely dramatic exposure changes and extremely dramatic, say, dehazing and that, so that you don't really pick it up. So I'm usually not too worried about that, but if you're a perfectionist and you want an exact subject selection, then that's the way to go. You'll see it didn't select the tusks there. If, again, you are very set on that, then you can add again to that with a brush, and you can brush that in over there. It still has auto mask on, so it's still looking for all the colors that are under the center of the brush. And that's, I would say, a much easier way of selecting a subject is by just using object selection from the start, rather than, I just find Lightroom makes more mistakes than when I tell it to look for an object in a certain area. So in that specific area, I would add texture and a slight little bit of clarity, and then I'm pretty happy with that. Now looking at the overall picture, I would go back to my original bits and I would say, right, now I can add a little bit more contrast. I'm happy it's not going to mess up the sky. I'll even do a little bit of dehaze. Okay, so to give you an idea, so we've done masking, we've done sky, we've done color selection, we've done object selection, we've done removal, and overall I think it still looks very natural. And I'm going to press the backslash key, that's before and that's after. Okay, and I would say that's a pretty good outcome. I'm going to press Y, so there you can see the before and the after. Double check yourself, check the corners, check the edges, check that your removal hasn't done anything funny over here, especially after you've done more things to the image. Just double check that it's done a good job of removal. This stick here, actually, for interest's sake, let's see, it does bug me a little bit. It might be tough, but let's give Lightroom a chance. I'm doing the remove, again, not the heal and clone tool, I'm doing the remove tool. I don't know, let's have a look. I'm going to say remove. I'm pretty happy with the area selection. Oh, I don't know. AI is good, but it's not that good yet. This is possible. I mean, hey, that's pretty darn good. I'm sorry, Lightroom. That is pretty darn good. Remember, for competitions, you just need to check that they allow minor removal of minor distractions like that. Wow, I'm very impressed. That is awesome. Okay, so there you go. The image is straightened, you've masked the elephant, you've done the greens and the blues, you've done the sky, you've done a bit of dehazing, some removal, and all in all, I think it's a win. That's it, folks. I hope you found that to be very useful. As always, please leave questions or comments down in the comment section below, and also please let us know if you'd like to see another one of these videos. Until next time, keep well. Bye-bye.